A personal testimony. It can be as frightening as giving a speech to a room full of strangers. No one wants to share their personal life story. But what if your story could change the heart of someone else? This task should be the easiest assignment we are ever asked to do, so why do we struggle so much with it? So many of us forget that our testimony is not something that we have to research. We can't go to the computer and Google our own personal testimony. Each one of us has a unique story that has been orchestrated by the one true creator of the world. So what is my unique story, you may ask? Well, it may not be filled with action, drama, or romance that may captivate everyone's attention, but I do know that the story I was blessed with to tell reminds me of the person I was, the person God has made me today, and the person He is preparing me to be in the future. As a little boy, I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I remember coming home from church one night and asking my mother what it meant to ask Jesus into my life. She brought me in a blanket. We went out to our front porch and sat out in our front porch swing and looked at the stars as we watched shooting stars go by and just watched the beautiful sky and the beautiful landscape that Jesus has created. And she explained to me what it meant to have Jesus come live in my life and what it meant and what Jesus had done for me. That night was the night that God came to live in my heart. But I will say, since then, it's not always been that easy. It's not always been as easy as just accepting what Jesus has done for me and believing in Him and committing my life to Him. There was a period in high school where I began to live a double life. I began to do things with friends that I worked with that I knew was not the Christian way to live. But on every Wednesday and Sunday, I would make sure that I was at church with a smile on and being the biggest Christian that I knew. I knew this was not all that God had for me, but I didn't really care at that moment because I wanted to live a life where everyone liked me, where I was accepted in all walks of my high school, no matter who they were. It was all about acceptance. But shortly after high school, when I began to go to college, my youth pastor came to me and said, "Scott, I'd really like for you to go to this trip with us." And reluctantly, I said yes, and it was a centrifuge camp at Mississippi College. And as I was there through that week, God began to show me and begin to work in my life and show me that He had more for me than a double life. He had more for me as long as I would follow Him and trust in Him with my whole life. As hard as it was to say no to these friends and to say no to these things, God grabbed a hold of my life again that week, and I was able to recommit my life to Him. And then the next year, my youth pastor came back to me and said, "Scott, I would really love for you to come on this trip with us. I know you're in college now, but I would really love for you to come help us with this and go on this trip with us." And reluctantly, again, as I was in college and I didn't really want to go with a bunch of high school students, I said yes. And that week, again at Mississippi College, as we're there and we're learning more and more about what God wants to do in our lives, I began to feel that God was telling me something and showing me something that He wanted me to do. I was very against what He had for me, very against and very reluctantly going to accept what it was. But on the last night, I broke in and God just showed me that He had something wonderful for me, and He wanted me to go into full-time ministry. As I went to my youth pastor and I told him this, he just wondered how long was it going to take for me to listen to Jesus Christ. God worked so much in my life from a little boy to now, and He continues to work into my life. He continues to show me day in and day out all of His grace, all of His mercy, and all of His glory. With all that said, my story comes back to one factor: Jesus Christ. Without Him, my life would be completely different. I look and think every day how grateful I am that He saved me and made me realize my purpose in life. Along with His saving grace, He has shown me how important my story truly is. My story, along with everyone else's, is a glimpse of Jesus' love for us. Your story may not seem that great or have an impactful message that someone else may have. But yours is unique because God created us all differently. We all have a different race to run. Some reach the finish line first and others not at all. Our races are not all the same. They have their unique test that we sometimes pass through safely or we come out with wounds and scars. Even though they are all different, they all have a common message, and that is Jesus Christ.